Navaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Yesterday we talked about this whole values which are all expansion values, right? Karuna, compassion, Maitri Bhava means you are friendly in general with people. So this is what we call Maitraha Karuna Evacha. And then I wanted to spend a little bit more time on Shami. As I told you, it doesn't mean forgiveness, it means accommodation. So what does, in practical terms, accommodation mean? Does it mean that you just kind of keep accommodating people and just let them be who they are? Or it means something more? So that means, one thing that we need to recognize is whenever you are closely interacting with people, any situation, whether it's your personal life or it's your family life or it's your work life, you can't just say, okay, let me accommodate that person, let that person be who that person is. Right? So that means, if you feel something is a little bit out of order, then it is important to make some, it's not that takeover and wanting to control and wanting to change anything, but you do have to take your steps to do what you can to influence change. Okay? So now when you are influencing change, you need to understand what this accommodation means. There's a beautiful book of Swami Dayananda called Value of Values, where he has talked about 20 values given in chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita, which I think it's really a nice book. And in Thursday class we do it, and it is really nice. No? It's fabulous, yeah. Okay, so what does accommodation mean? Practically. Doesn't mean just let people be who they are. It means you try to influence change, but after that give them the space to change. Don't take over, don't control, because that's actually at times counterproductive. So when you influence change, you need to recognize first where in the spectrum of change that person is. What it means is, person can be in at different levels. The first one is the person is in denial. So that means the person who you are trying to influence, that person doesn't see that that person has a problem, right? So what does it mean? Suppose you find somebody is lying, suppose, right? Anybody. And then you want to influence a person, but the person denies it completely. Oh, I'm not lying. What rubbish are you saying? So that means the person is in denial. The other possibility is the person is defiant. What it means is slightly different from here. Here the person is not willing to accept for oneself that this is my problem. In the second case, the person may recognize, but when you say it, the person will not admit it. This is very common with reference to kids, right? So that means that they themselves may recognize something, but the minute the parents say something, they will say, who are you to say something? So that means they are themselves not in a complete denial, but they are defiant with reference to you. The third is, the person is trying to recognizes the need for change and trying to change, but is slow. Slow means the person keeps going back to the old habits. So that means the person is making some effort, the person does want to change, but it is slow either because the person keeps going back to the same habits, because these habits have formed superhighway. That's why they keep going back to right? Or sometimes the person is able to change, but sometimes the person falls back. So that means there is no one pattern that the person is constantly governed by habit. Sometimes a person is able to actually bring about the change, sometimes the person falls back, right? Slow means both. And the last thing, which is really nice, and that is what we call, they have built new country road of wisdom. So that means they have actually accomplished the change. They wanted to make. Right? So that means how you are going to influence the person. Here you don't need to influence the person because here the change is already accomplished. But here, even if it is accomplished, generally what happens is, till we want the change, we keep giving feedback. But once the change is done, then we stop giving feedback. Here also we need to give a feedback, saying that I'm really happy that you're able to do this, because everybody needs this, right? Everybody needs some encouragement. Even teachers need feedback. So our teacher, right, sometimes he used to come out of the class, and obviously when we went to tell him, Swamiji, it was a brilliant class, he was like all smiley, and I was so happy that it was a nice class. Sometimes he himself would say, I gave such a great class, which is great because everybody needs that feedback. So that means even after the change is actually taking place, we still need to give the feedback because everybody actually loves it. We only give feedback till it's not there, but we forget to give feedback when it is there. So that's one thing, right? Now, the three things, what you do as a person, because this is with reference to the other person, right? So here, because it is accommodation. Accommodation means accommodating others. Suppose the person is in denial, and suppose you keep telling the person, don't lie, don't lie, don't lie. What will happen? Huh? Exactly. No matter how many times you tell that person, right? If the person is in denial, if the person is doing for whatever reason, right? Sometimes they are helplessly doing it. Sometimes they feel some gain is coming from that. So that means they are not going to change even if you keep giving them bhashan for 100 times. It's actually counterproductive at times. So that means in this case, you can't just say, oh, leave that person, right? So let me first give you an example, and then I'll tell you what else can you do. So I have a friend who came to me and she said, my son has become compulsive liar. So what is this compulsive liar? Means he lies. Generally we lie for things which to gain something. But here he just lies out of habit. So that means you just lie even if you have any gain or not. So I said, okay, give me an example. So she said, like once she knew his teacher in school. So the teacher said that she likes some food, right? Some Punjabi food. So she's a Punjabi. So she sent the food through her son for the teacher. Now when the son came back, she asked him, did you give the food? And he said, yeah, I gave the food to the teacher. Now after 2 or 3 days, she didn't hear anything from the teacher. So she just wanted to check, did you like it or whatever. So she called the teacher and she says, you got the food? And she said, no, I didn't get the food. So that means what happened is he carried it, he told her that he gave her. What is his gain?
The food.
Almost nothing. On the food. Maybe, but he could have got it at home, right? If he had asked his mom, he would have got it. It's not like, he had to. So this is what we call habitual. Habitual lying means this is a habit. Sometimes you do it for your gain, sometimes you just do it because this has formed into a habit. So now I asked her, so what do you do? Right? So what do you do? So she says, I keep telling him, lying is not good. So now she has studied value of values. So she tells him, oh, there are consequences to this lying. And then what is this boy? He's like, yeah, mom. He's not at all interested, right, in listening to her bhashan. So now she's saying, then she came to me, what can I do? So one thing that you can do, where is he? Either he's defiant or he's in denial. We don't know. Because I haven't met him, so I don't know. I mean, I've met him, but I've never talked about this problem, so I don't know which of the two he belongs to. But one thing I told her, that every time you tell him that don't lie, what are you doing? You're confirming that he's a liar. So that means you keep telling him, this is your problem and I'm trying to correct it. So the person is actually little resistant and is not willing to listen. So I told her, instead of giving a lecture on how it is not good to lie, why don't you, instead of giving any lecture, because it hasn't worked at all. She has been trying and trying and trying and it hasn't worked. So you can actually formulate a question. I spoke to the teacher and she said she didn't receive it. Then the onus of answering lies on him. He has to explain. You are not labeling him. Right? You are not saying that you are like this, you are like that. You are just asking a question. When you ask a question, that person has to think and has to give some reason. And suppose that the reason is slightly weak or whatever, then you can counter ask and you can ask a question. Through this method, what you can do without being aggressive or without giving an advice, you can get the person's process of thinking going. So this is one thing that I really learned from my dad, because every time, how as kids you have opinions which are all over the place, but you think you are really smart and yours is the opinion, and that kind of arrogance many smart kids have, right? So he used to not say, what is this opinion? This is completely rubbish. He never said that. He will just ask me, why do you think like this? Then I have to think, why do I think like this? Then suppose I say why I think, then he will counter ask, but why not this? So this is what we call leading. Leading means what? You are guiding the person without labeling the person. This is something which is extremely effective with anybody. Right? The minute you label the person, the defenses of the person are really up. And the person will either further be in denial or defiant and will counter-attack you and tell you names in return. But here you actually are trying to solve the problem, and by just triggering some thinking processes in the person. There is one other method which is very good for people who are in denial, is that not to actually talk about them directly, but tell them stories. Stories means what? Suppose a lot of times we do corporate seminars and we tell people stories of Mahabharata. Now, in Mahabharata there are all kinds of characters. They don't feel threatened, right? Because it's about Duryodhana, it's about Karna, it's about Bhishma, it's about... so they have got nothing to do. But what they are thinking, why they are thinking what they are thinking, what are the consequences of their thinking. When you hear of some third character, what does it do? It nourishes the psyche. Actually, your thinking processes begin to be sophisticated and more developed. So this is a very good method for people who are in denial. Denial means either you ask them questions or you tell stories of. Sometimes you can tell stories of your own life, right? This was my failure and this is what I learned from it. Nowadays, in business schools, when they invite somebody, people talk a lot about their own life and their own lessons and all that. So what happens is they are talking about their life, but what is it doing? They are not just there to just talk about their life. What does it do to this listener? It gives them clues about the values that they carry, what they learned. So this is something which is very useful. Okay? Defiant. If the person who is in front of you is not in denial but is just defiant because they will not listen from you, then it is very good to involve some third person, because then the person is much more open. And this is where you see a lot of people who have issues and they go and see a totally independent person called psychologist, and there they can open up and they can talk about it freely. So that means, but with reference to you, it may not work. The same processes may not work. Then those who are trying to change, but they are either slow or they go back to habit, generally we give a feedback. What kind of feedback? See, you are still like this. Right? Or we, the worst. Sometimes my students, they said when we go home, people tell us, you're going to Gita class, but you still have anger issues? So what does it mean? You may be trying to get over your anger, but it's not going to go overnight. So that means during this period, instead of encouraging that person, if you constantly put down that person, it is counterproductive. So you have to play a supportive role. So you have to give support. So in each of these, what you do to accommodate is different. Right? And here, when somebody has already changed, then as I told you, give a positive feedback. So that is something which is extremely useful. Now, as it is for the accommodation of others, the same thing applies to you yourself. Please don't think that you also have to learn to accommodate yourself, because you have exactly the same problems that somebody else has. You have to recognize that there are some issues with reference to which you are in denial. So many of us are not willing. It's so easy to see problems with other people, but it's so hard to see problems with yourself, our own issues. So when people hear sometimes the story of Mahabharata, they'll say, how can such an evolved person like Bhishma do this? It seems very easy to figure it out for Bhishma. How can Dronacharya do this? All the time people ask me this question. How can such evolved people make this kind of decisions? So that means for others it's so easy to see, but when we do it with reference to ourselves, we are not able to see it. So many of times we are in denial of our own things, and we find escapes to dodge it. Sometimes we are defiant. So that means when we know it, but when somebody else says, then we try to defend ourselves. That is also very common in close relationships, right? So that happens. When we are trying to change, but we are slow, and the habit is running over sometimes. At that time, as I told you, that we need to be kind to ourselves. What kind of message? Either the others give you the message, or you give a message to yourself, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not able to do it, I haven't still kind of worked on all the values that Gita is talking about. This is a very negative feedback, right? It's a feedback which is your own feedback to yourself, which is constantly putting yourself down. So we have to avoid this kind of a feedback. Whether others give us positive feedback or not, at least we have to give ourselves positive feedback if we have tried. And when we have accomplished the change, again we have to give feedback to ourselves, and we have to, actually it's really, really good. So just a very small funny example, please don't take it seriously. But we go to river every morning, right? So we are freezing. So one day somebody said, oh, let's pretend it's really warm. I said no, because it's not warm. So we might as well be honest and say it is cold. But if it is so cold and you still dip, you have to congratulate yourself. So you don't have to distort the fact, please understand, you don't have to distort the fact that it was warm and I entered it, because that's totally wrong. But what you have to say is, it was really cold and I still was able to do it. What will it do? Your self-confidence, your strength will increase. I can do it. I can do difficult things. Instead of trying to twist and say it's easy, because it's not easy. So these small things, you have to start with authenticity. If your brain begins to twist reality, there is no end to how much you twist. The whole thing is, you have to, the one qualification for Vedanta, your mind has to abide in realities and then work with realities. So that is what we call a feedback. Create a feedback system for yourself. Great, I could do it, even though it is so cold. So that's a better feedback than to twist the facts. Okay? So this is what we call accommodation shabd. The next. Satpurushta satatam yogi yatatma drudha nishchayaha maya pitamano buddhiti madbhakta same priyaha. Who wants to read the translation? Savita.
The one who is completely satisfied, who is always united, who has mastery over his mind, whose ascertainment is firm, whose mind and intellect are resolved in me, who is my devotee, is beloved to me.
So that means, as I told you, that every aspect of your life has to be what? Governed by your relationship with Isvara. This is why which chapter? Bhakti Yoga. You enter into a relationship. Okay? So one who is, over a period of time, you have to become a relatively content person. Content person doesn't mean that you don't have ambition. It doesn't mean that you don't try enough. It's not like that. But how? What is the place from which you are trying? What is the place from which you are accomplishing? If it is coming from your pressure on yourself to prove yourself, that means you still need growth. If it is to prove to others that how good you are, you still need growth. But if it is an expression of your application, you are using your talents, your skills, it's wonderful. So that means, because this brain is given to you, opportunities are given to you, talent is given to you, skill is given to you. So it's wonderful to use it, right? And to use it well and to use it alertly, but not either trying to prove anything to anybody else or prove something to yourself. It's your expression, it's your offering to Isvara, to the order of Isvara. This is when you can do a lot more and have much less loads. So this is what we call complete, not then always united. So that means in all the role playing that you do, and while you are facing all the challenges that each role may bring, you never lose sight of Ishvara and never enter into this blame mode or disappointment mode. Even if you even if it happens, it doesn't matter. You have to bring yourself back very quickly. So there is one thing that Swamiji used to say, that what is being objective? You think what is being objective is all the time, always in touch with reality. That may be possible, that may not be possible. Mind is such that it will go on its own patterns of behavior. So what he said is, if you are losing track, suppose you are becoming subjective, and you recognize that you are subjective, then you are objective. Why? Because you have recognized that you have gone off track. Generally what happens when we go off track, we don't even realize. So that's why we get carried away. The minute you recognize that your thinking processes are getting a little convoluted, little distorted, your ability to recognize it and bring it back online. This is what we call mastery. Right? So this is what always, and that happens when you bring back the reality. So if you try to convince yourself, oh, people are like that, it's okay, let go, that is not going to do the job. You have to assess what is the situation and you have to do what needs to be done. And after that, you have to recognize that there are so many things which are not in my control, and the results anyway come from the infallible laws of Ishvara. That's when you actually, after having done what you have done, then you don't carry the load. So there was a beautiful story that our teacher used to say, and that was a nice story. And there was a man who was traveling in a train. And when he was traveling in the train, he was carrying a huge basket of vegetables. So the co-traveler who was traveling with him, he just asked him a question, why are you carrying this basket? So this man started telling him the story. He says, I live in this village and I haven't studied, I haven't done anything. So now the only thing that I can do to earn is to sell vegetables. Then he said, but you know what, in my village there is not sufficient demand. So if I were to earn enough money, then I not only have to sell the vegetables in my village, but I have to go from village to village. So this is why now you see my lot. I have to carry this big vegetable basket and I have to go from one village to the other. I have to educate my kids, I have to look after my parents, I have to support my wife. So there was such a heaviness in him. Then the co-traveler says, I totally understand. I understand the fact that you are not educated, you have to earn money, and this is the way you are earning the money, and your village alone is not sufficient, so you have to move from village to village. That's fine. But why are you carrying the load now? Why don't you put it, the train will carry it. We have to do what we have to do, but all the loads that we carry in our head, we can offer to Isvara. Isvara in form of order will carry everything in form of cause and effect. The world is not partial, unfair world. The world is full of laws and intelligence, which is Isvara. We have to unload our loads onto Isvara and do everything that you have to do with lightness. That's why over a period of time, even when you come and teach, you don't have to pretend you are some great guru and all. Nothing. Just share what you know. What happens? Spontaneity comes, naturalness comes, non-pretense comes, honesty comes, authenticity comes. You are not here performing a show. You are not here to impress others. You are not here to show your scholarship to others. You are just here to share some truth. And that's it. Be normal about it. Right? As we unload ourselves. This is what Swamiji used to say, that there is a big difference that it took me long to understand. He used to say, there is a difference between saying Ishvara is infallible and what is infallible is Ishvara. I used to wonder, what is the difference? What is it talking about? I didn't know what it meant. Then over a period of time, I understood what it means. So that means, in one case, you have decided what is fair. You are the one who are smart and you have decided what is fair and what is unfair. If what happens in the world matches what you think is fair, then Ishvara is infallible. But the minute it deviates from what you think, all unfair, I know better, I can fix the world, there is an arrogance there. You are trying to become bigger than Ishvara. That is something which is the problem. So that means you are the one who tells or is the last decider of what is right and wrong, what is fair and unfair. The other way, what is infallible is Isvara. It's a totally different understanding. Whether I understand it or not, whether it makes sense to me or not, whether it seems unequal to me or not, that is because my vision of reality is limited. It is not the world is not performing well, right? Or Isvara needs some fixing up. It is my understanding which needs to be revised. Why? Because sometimes I have very incomplete information. And based on that incomplete information, I have made huge conclusions. And as a result of those huge conclusions, I give name to the world, I give name to Isvara, I give name to everything. That has to change. This is what we call, what is infallible is Isvara. Isvara doesn't play a game of dice. Isvara doesn't make a mistake. Laws are never infallible in nature. But if you feel that something is out of place, by all means, use your free will and put it back in place. That's your prerogative. It doesn't mean what is infallible is Isvara means I just sit and watch. That's not. Because you are a participant and you have to constantly do what you have to do. But the laws never fail. That is what we call relaxing in the lack of Isvara. So one yoga person came to me once and she made a very nice observation. In a feedback session, she gave this feedback. She says, I always thought that relaxation was an outcome of some activity. You do pranayama and you relax. You do meditation and you relax. She said, in Vedanta, the source of relaxation is what? My relationship with Krishna. I can be highly active and I can be relaxed. I can do so many things and I can participate and I'm active and I'm busy and I still can be relaxed. So this is what we call, it is relaxation which is far deeper and far more fundamental, which is an outcome of recognizing the nature of Isvara and what? Entering into relationship with it. Life becomes a walk. It's okay, everything becomes pleasurable. Until then, everything is a push. So, this is what he says now. So, this is what we call always united, mastery over mind we have seen, and whose mind and intellect are resolved. So what does it mean? So there is 4 things that actually, the growth of, we say, antahkarana shuddhi. This is the word which is used in Vedanta Shastra for preparation for knowledge. This is a very common word used in Bhagavad Gita. Even in Gita home study, it is used a lot. Antahkarana shuddhi. So the knowledge is going to take place in the mind. So karana is instrument and inner instrument. What does it mean? The mind, right? Which is your inner instrument. And shuddhi means purification. What does it mean? It means that there are 4, as we saw, there are 4 functions of the mind. One is what we call manas. What is manas? Your emotions. The second is buddhi, which is your intellect. Chittam, which means memory. ahankara, which means your I sense. What does antakarana shuddhi mean? All these four functions have to work well. What does it mean? If your emotions are all over the place, either you have suppressed them, or you're in denial of them, or they are running the show and you burst out with the emotions, you need to address this and let your emotions flow naturally in Isvara's order, which they are appropriate to occasion. At the same time, there are no stories and there are no dramas here. Okay? The second is intellect. Your logical processes. The logical mind is an important mind. Because all the prakriyas and so much of Vedanta, the morning class we see, we have to use our ability to understand things clearly. So many prakriyas require logic. So our logical processes have to be in order. Because even if you give right answer, but if you give it for wrong reason, that means you haven't understood it. So that means you have to clear your logical processes. Your memory. You have seen from my morning thing, everybody liked my morning summary. Why? Because you have to remember what we did in the first verse till now, and you have to keep putting it together. It's not like the first class is a first class and second class is unconnected to the first class, and you just know everything in piecemeal and you don't know how it all connects into forming one whole vision. Memory is required, connection, seeing the connections are required, the implied meaning of things. All this requires a lot of memory and putting together things. Otherwise, it always remains piecemeal. All little information floating in your head, but you don't know how it all connects to form a coherent vision. So that means our conscious memories are required and connections. This is why to Medha Devi we pray. What? Medha is what? Capacity to understand and capacity to retain what you understand. Not forget. And able to see the connections. Then there is an unconscious memory. So some things, as I told you in that this woman who felt that her father did not like her or whatever, and that kept interfering in her adult life. So that means she only knew that she did not have good relationship with her father, with her husband, with her son, but she didn't see the common thread. The common thread was what? I'm not loved. That is a common thread. And that keeps projecting in different ways with different people. So this taking care of the unconscious memory is your messages to yourself, which are common thread which govern your behavior. And finally, your I sense. What is your I sense? As I told you, ahankara in Sanskrit is not pride. It's not like, in colloquial, in vernacular languages, ahankara means what? At least in Gujarati, it means the person is proud. Here, ahankara refers to the function of the mind where, as I told you in the morning, that I sense. Not only the pot is known, but I say, I know the pot. That is what we call I sense. I do, I know, I walk, I sleep. This is what we call I sense. All the activities that are happening at the level of senses, at the level of body, at the level of mind, get connected to your sense of I. This is what we call I sense. And this I sense is functional and it is Isvara's creation. So it's going to be there. It cannot not be there. Otherwise what will happen? You're hungry, and if you don't have I sense, you will start feeding Sita Devi. Because you have lost your I sense. Do you understand? It's just functional sense. So please don't make it into a problem. Even now, for example, I know I'm talking, right? I'm not confused who's talking. That is I sense. So therefore, I sense by itself is not bad. But what happens is, due to our distortions, either your I sense is artificially inflated, this is what we call superiority complex, or it is artificially deflated, which is what we call inferiority complex. Antakarana Shuddhi requires what? If it is here, you need to bring it up. If it is here, you need to bring it down. This is what we call healthy self-image. So if you have sense of superiority and you think you're the coolest person and you're responsible for all your success, now suppose you keep telling yourself, oh, I want to be humble, I want to be humble. Why should you be humble? You will ask, one inner voice of you will ask, why should I be humble? I've accomplished so much. So why not I say it? So this is not like some advice that you have to be humble. This is taken care of and you naturally become humble when you bring in facts. What are the facts? For you to achieve anything in this world, you become CEO, suppose. Achieve anything in this world, how many people's participation is required? Who all have contributed to you, for you to become a CEO? Who? Your parents, your teachers, your friends helped you out. When you joined the company, you were just somebody who entered the company. So your colleagues, your boss, then what? As I told you, just one meal of yours, the whole sun participated, water participated, trees participated. So that means if it is a contribution of so many people and you attribute only to you, are you in touch with realities? No. And the minute you are not in touch with realities, you think it's all you who has done it all, then what will happen when you talk to others? That attitude will come out. Whether you realize or not, there will be this kind of tendency to look down on others, think that I'm much bigger, I'm much better. And when that happens, what happens is, does anybody like to work with somebody where you feel inadequate? Does anybody like it? They may or may not say anything because their jobs depend upon you, or their livelihood depends upon you. But will anybody like it? Nobody will like it. So that means when somebody doesn't like it, their participation naturally goes down. And when their participation goes down, you're still depending upon them for your success. So what does it mean? That you're digging your own grave. Right? This doesn't help you, because you are living in an interconnected world. Your success has depended upon contribution of so many people. If you want to continue to be successful, you still need participation of that many or even more people. And somewhere along the line, if you attributed the whole success to you, then that will actually create your downfall. Because you don't take people along. You don't take people along with you. So that means these are all the distortions. This superiority has to come down to healthy self-image. No, not selfless. Selfless means you are very weak. I'm nobody. You don't want to be nobody. have a healthy, good self-image. Now, suppose you are this inferiority complex, I am no good. Many people have that. It's surprising how many people have that. That whole sense of inadequacy, feeling not good enough. Many people. So that means that has to be, and sometimes it actually, the human mind is so complex, so that I'm not good enough, now I want to compensate. So then what do? I start showing I'm so good. That now that inferiority complex itself gets further distorted into superiority complex. All compensation, inner compensations. So that's why human being becomes complex. So here your self-image, what has to be lifted with recognizing that what you are a co-participant in Isvara's creation. Through your free will, you are given the capacity to make your contribution to this order of Isvara. And the minute you focus on using your skills, doing what you can do within your capacity to do what you have to do, the whole dissatisfaction and not feeling good actually converts into what can I do now? That's what you do. So this is what we call Antahkarana Shuddhi. Each function has to, this is what he said, Mayarpit Manobuddhi. They all have to be aligned to Ishvara's order. This is an empowered Antahkarana. Antahkarana which is not ordinary, the mind which is not ordinary. So this is what he says, Mayarpit Manobuddhihi Yomad Bhaktaha Samipriyaha. Then the 15th one. Yasmano dvijate lokaha lokano dvijate jayaha harshamarshabhayudvegaiti mukto yasacha me priyaha. Who wants to read? Neema.
The one because of whom people do not get disturbed and who does not get disturbed by people and who is free from elation, intolerance, fear and anxiety. He is beloved to me.
Okay. Now this lack of fear, there is one thing which is a fact. What is a fact? That nobody knows what tomorrow is going to be like. We think that we know because generally there is not many events, but there are many times many days will bring events which will surprise you, right? So that means tomorrow nobody knows. And because nobody knows tomorrow, what is our attitude towards that? We have certain amount of fear. How will things turn out? And this is why so many of our decisions are also made based on fear. And you want to, first of all, you want to create a scenario, and in that scenario there is something which is like not so good, and then your decision is made to avoid that which is not so good. So that is what we call the whole working is like little negative. It's all about trying to protect yourself against potential risks. So that may not be bad strategy as such, but every time, what is the problem with that? Future is unknown, but your mind is only giving you negative possibilities. That is an orientation. Orientation means you don't say, hey, yeah, things will work for me. And what can I do to get things to work for me? So this is where the whole thing is said. So what do you need to do? You need to develop trust.
Can you change the pen?
Trust. I trust it. Okay. Trust doesn't mean trust is working. Okay. So trust doesn't mean you blindly trust and you think everything will be wonderful. That is not called trust. Right?
We'll get some new pens, some black pens.
So that doesn't mean trust, right? That everything will be fine. That is yet another problem, right? But generally, in the fairness of the universe, what does it mean? The universe is not out there to get you. So in future projections, if you're all the time, your scenarios that you create for yourself are always negative, and your decision making is to avoid that catastrophe, then that's something wrong in your decision making. So you have to see world as opportunities. And in that opportunities, how can you apply yourself to not only help yourself, but to help others? So this is what we mean by what? That the person who is free from fear. Okay. Now, there is another thing. The other thing is very beautiful, that people, what? People do not get disturbed by that person. What does it mean? If the people feel, the more and more you evolve, there is a danger that you will begin to be highly judgmental of others. So that means you say, this person is not spiritually evolved. And you have other vocabulary. This person is a samsari. We go on adding vocabulary. Judgment, these are judgment words. This person is materialistic. What is materialistic? We just pray to Goddess Lakshmi to give us all the resources. Who is materialist? There is no material, there is only Isvara. So that means the more and more that judgmental person, who feels comfortable with that judgmental person? That doesn't mean you don't have any judgments. Judgments are required in life, right? What is the difference between judging things and being judgmental? Judging is required at every stage of your life. Do I invest in this stock or not? Do I take this job or I take this job? Do I enter into a business? Do I enter into a startup or a big company? These kind of things you always have to assess and you have to have some judgments and you have to do what you have to do. But being judgmental is something which is very different. What is being judgmental? Without having, somebody has a definition?
Mutilate yourself by putting others down.
Opinionated.
Assumption about something.
Okay. So that means,
When you have a view without any basis.
without any sufficient data. Excellent. This is exactly. Without having sufficient data, you have come to big conclusions. Categorical conclusions. Big categorical. This is called being judgmental. With insufficient data, you make huge conclusions, and those conclusions are very categorical. Every time you make judgments about, and then now it takes the spiritual form. What is the spiritual form? I get bad vibe from this person. First of all, what is a vibe? Second, how much you know that person? What do you know about that person to make such a big label about that person? What, you're so good and that person is a bad vibe. So that person is put in a what? One whole box without knowing anything about it. Then you tell, I'm becoming so subtle. What subtle? You're becoming more and more judgmental. Do you understand? The whole vocabulary around it, all very sophisticated vocabulary, which tells you that you are so good, right? And constantly judging people. Who will feel comfortable with that person? We need to rephrase. It's true, with some people we feel more comfortable than with others. There is nothing wrong with that. Even Lord Krishna was more friendly with Arjuna than with Kauravas. And even among Pandavas, he was more friendly with Arjuna. There is nothing wrong with that. You can have preferences. You don't have to be equal to everyone. But you can reconvert it and you can say, I feel more comfortable with this person. Simple. Become that simple person. When you say that person has bad vibe, you are dismissing the other person. When you say, I don't feel comfortable, it's you. And you can have a preference. There is nothing wrong about it. So that means all this pseudo-spiritual language and all we have to get rid of. Vibes and this and that and energy is bad energy. What energy? Which bad energy? And the people are who are, and maybe they are, there's somebody that I know, she's an aura, whatever. I think I told you this. She's an aura cleanser. So what if your aura is all bad, then she'll clean it up and she'll make it nice. So I said, so I asked her, so how long does it stay, this clean aura? She said 3 hours. So what you're thinking again, what is changing, and it keeps changing, right? So there's nothing fixed about any aura. Forget it. These are ways to label people. These are ways to be judgmental. Nobody will, that pseudo-spiritual person, nobody will feel comfortable with. Highly judgmental. And who is, the person who has a relatively open mind and is not jumping to conclusions, is open enough to revise your opinions. Initially you may have a judgment like that and you are open to revision, provided new data. People will feel comfortable with you. It is interesting how many times, it's amazing, people come to me and they tell me all kinds of things about their life, and then they tell me, don't tell this to my best friend, I haven't told her yet. Why? Because that person knows that there is no judgment coming, only well-wishing, no taking advantage of that information, just helping the other person to evolve. This is a mature human being. This is what all of us have to grow up to be. Right? So people feel comfortable with you.
So you may not be judgmental, but sometimes you tend to have intuitions of what you want to do without sufficient
Data.
basis.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what do you call that?
So that also, this intuition also, sometimes it does give us some data. What is intuition? We need to understand. Okay. On everything I have to now give a talk. So, what is an intuition? Intuition is, because I can't answer without defining what is intuition.
Let you define.
Okay. What is an intuition?
So you preempt the situation without basis. That's
Yes.
the way I look at intuition.
Okay. That's true. Now, there is a kind of a, what do we call intuition? We need to first understand. So there is a mind where what happens is, for example, you see this, and generally what happens, through logic you infer something else. Like for example, this is not called intuition. Suppose you see smoke, you infer there is fire. This is not called intuition, this is called inference. Right? Now what has happened is, sometimes our mind has collected a lot of data through inference, right? It has seen some patterns, it has seen some behaviors, and it has related. And maybe there is some inference there. But at this given point in time, when this input comes, the person has not used these logical processes yet, and some answer pops up. Because the person has not used the logical processes, this is what we call intuition. It's the answer that your mind gives immediately without its normal way of processing the data. This is what we call intuition. Now, neither you can say that it is completely wrong. Why? Because your mind is very clever. It can actually, everything doesn't require figuring out logically and thinking and all. It can process the data very fast and it can just give you this answer. But what happens is sometimes our inferences are not totally accurate. The past inferences. What does it mean? That just one example, I think I gave you that example, somebody did not smile. There are more than one reason. But you have decided that person doesn't like you. So now you meet that person and your intuition is, that person doesn't like me. Right? Because now the mind has processed that previous data and has given you this intuition. So that could be due to incorrect past information or collection of information, and this is how it gives you some feedback. Now what you have to do is little bit check it. Because if you only go by your intuition, sometimes it can be highly misguided. Because the processing that you and the attributes and the weight you have given to things in the past is not very accurate. So it has to be what? That you don't have to not listen to, because that's a capacity of mind, but it needs to be further checked with little bit with your reasoning. Otherwise, some people say that they are highly intuitive, and what happens is they make extremely impulsive decisions and they guise it under I'm very intuitive, but they don't make enough, they don't use enough cognitive brain to substantiate what they think with what they have to do. So one example I give, this is just a light example. I said, sometimes I ask people, why did you get married to this? When somebody is coming complaining, I can't get along with my husband and he's like this and he's like this. So I said, why did you get married? I said, I had intuition that he's my, what is it called? Soulmate. So now, what happened to that intuition? Your intuition was that he's my soulmate. And what happened 5 years from now? You're complaining about him. Souls are changing. Soulmate. So that means now my soulmate is somebody else. This is how it happens. So this intuition, what happens is we can't give overweight to it. But sometimes what happens is mind is clever. So it does give us something. So we do need to take it into account, but not only that. Okay? Now, okay. Now the second thing I want to say is that people are not kind of afraid of him, but he is also not wanting to be away from people. This is also very nice, this kind of romantic dreams that we have, which is what the spiritual person removes oneself from the world and goes to the mountains. May be true, but the thing is, not because the person is afraid of others. If you go to the mountain because you are afraid of dealing with people, then there is something wrong. You may go because you want to go, but not because you are running away from people. There is a big difference between that. Right? So you are comfortable in the company of people. This is also very, very important. I just want to just make one point which is really nice. I read a book by What was that book, Surya, that Rumi and his teacher, Shams of 40,000 rules. That will be 40,000. When will you master that? Sounds harder than Upanishad. 40 rules of love. Is that what Rumi? So there is one thing which is really beautiful. So this Shams of what? Yeah. So Sham of Tabriz is telling Rumi. What is he telling? He's saying that we all start with a certain amount of what we call the feeling of a victim. The world is not treating me well. So I'm good, but everybody else in the world is not good. Right? This is the most basic way of operating in the world. Then, as you grow in your journey, what happens is you start taking responsibility for your behaviors. This is the second step of growth. Now, taking responsibility of growth for your actions requires some self-reflection. And that self-reflection takes some time. So you can't always be among people because you need to spend some time with yourself in order to kind of recognize some deeper who you are and how are you operating. So it requires some self-reflection. Now, depending upon how deep that self-reflection is, you may want to spend time with yourself. So that is what you are little bit withdrawing from constantly engaging with the world to be able to spend time with yourself. And in this book, it is said, it seems as though this is the ultimate stage, this is the final stage. But the Shams is telling Rumi that this is not the final stage. After you have done sufficient reflection, then what? You can go back to people and you can be comfortable. Before, the world was creating discomfort in you. Now the world is no longer creating discomfort in you because you have mastery over yourself. So that means you can go back. That is yet another stage. And what is the final? And you are comfortable. Final stage. What is the final stage? Not only you are comfortable with people, but you become source of inspiration for others. You become the leader. People are inspired by you. And you guide them in their personal growth. So when you are here, what is your relationship with people? Are you afraid of being with people? No. You are their supporter. You are their guide. You are lifting them up. So this is what we say, that he is also not the spiritual growth, if it comes from wanting to be away from these lost people, all this mindset has to change. Don't give labels to people, don't give labels to their pursuits, their mind. Who are you to sit here without knowing anything, make such huge statements about them? Who is lost? Who knows who's lost? So that means that you are comfortable with people, and not only you are comfortable with people, but you are able to inspire others. So this is what this verse is talking about. Is one thing that I want to say, that Swamiji is here. I want to say one thing, that whenever I go to Germany, so many people talk about you. You are so helpful, and that how much you kind of are so friendly. Rudra talks about you. That so many people, one person was looking for you, I think Faye and Viresh. all these people, I go around the world, and when I say that I do, classes in Rishikesh and all, one person they remember is Swamiji. Yeah. He's helpful, he's cheerful, and even Andre told me, right, that he is friends. So he's friendly with everybody, helping everybody. Not acting like I'm a big Swami and you, not at all.
He's even huggable.
What?
He's even huggable.
This Swami means we have some image, oh, that person is like that, poach there, and he's like, making you feel you're small and serve me and all. And the more you are secure with yourself, more less and less pretense. More and more just friendly, just be who you are. Right? So this is how real, it may seem like a Swami is renouncing the world. Swami is playing a very big role of uplifting the world. Don't see them as people who leave the world. They are actually lifting the whole standard. Source of inspiration for others. Every time I see this Bhandara, it's just incredible how people come from around the world to feed these sadhus. And they give dakshina to these sadhus. They don't know any of these sadhus. They don't know any one of them. And why they are coming? Somebody is coming from the US, somebody is coming from Australia, somebody is coming. Every day we saw Bhandara. This culture doesn't see sannyasis as dropouts. They uphold the culture. They uphold the Vedic culture. That there is something called self-knowledge, for which they dedicate their life. And they are not thinking about what, they are not afraid to drop everything else. If there were no sannyasis left in India, whole Vedic culture and its basis, moksha is a goal. People can dedicate their life to it. They can give up all the other roles. This is a live tradition. This is not just in the books, it's there in the culture. This is why people call India a spiritual country. Not just in books, in forms, the way people live, their values, what do they consider important. It's all here, among you, everywhere, here. So, our Swamiji used to say that the sannyasi in any other country where you have no job, you have no family, you have nothing, that person is called what? Hobo. Hobo means you are just roaming around endlessly. Homeless. Yeah. Whereas in this country, people travel from USA to give them food, to look after them. Because they know that for them, knowledge is the highest. And for that, they have given up so many things. So that means these persons are not, if you have become a sannyasi because the world is bothering you and people are bothering you, you are not a real sannyasi. You have become sannyasi. If you have become sannyasi because you have love for this knowledge, then you are a real sannyasi. Then if you have love for knowledge, then what? Are you going to be afraid of people? Are you trying to stay away from people? You will share this knowledge with the people or interact with them lovingly or whatever, in whichever way you will uplift them. So this is the verse. 60. Anapechishu chirdaksha udasino gatam pyataha sarvarambha parityagi yo matbhaktasya me priyaha. You will read? Yeah, Vishnu.
The one who has no dependence is clean, able, and neutral, from whom fear has gone, who has completely given up all initiations of actions, and who is my devotee, is beloved to me.
Okay. So this particular verse, actually was completely given up actions. Here we are talking about sannyasi, which I just talked about, right? So this is what the now. What does clean mean? Who has no dependence. This is beautiful. The person who has no dependence. What happens is, in relationships, there are two issues that we face. One is you want to control the other, and the second is you become dependent on the other. So that means you lose your independence. You can't think on your own, you can't make decisions on your own, you're constantly depending upon somebody else. So what is wrong with over-dependence? You are born, understand this, so what he was talking about, natural order. You are born with you as being the center for yourself. Who is born with somebody else being the center? Is anybody born? This is Isvara's order. Who is center of your life? When you are born? You. All of us. Don't take it literally at the minute you are born. That's not what I'm saying. As we are born, right? What it means is when we are born and we are going to live our life, what is going to be the center? Us. It can never be somebody else. Suppose you make somebody else your center. Your whole life is about pleasing somebody, or you think you will be pleased when you are with somebody. What will happen is, the natural program is that you are at the center. What have you done through your thinking process? Made somebody else as a center. As you make somebody else as a center, what happens to this center? It begins to be weak. It weakens. And as you become a weaker and weaker person, who likes a weak person? Who likes weak persons? Nobody likes weak people. So that means what we are trying to do is not to make this center weak. This center has to be strong. But strong, not artificially strong. What? Strong with one's connection with Ishvara. It's responsibly strong. When it is responsibly strong, then what happens is, the very understanding of Ishvara brings about what we call self-expansion. Because Ishvara is that which connects me with everybody else. So that means, I am strong, and from my strength, I understand my connection with everything else, and I choose actions which will not only benefit me, but through my actions, I try to have a larger and larger impact. This is what we call self-expansion. This is not called selflessness. So what it means is, suppose you become weak and all your actions are driven by weakness, you give wrong signals to everybody. So sometimes, sometimes the kids tell parents, mom or dad, whatever, why are you weak? They don't see it as some great virtue, they see it as an issue. So, this is something that we all need to understand, that we are not, Vedic culture doesn't talk about being selfless. Selfless means your center is not there. Everybody needs to develop a healthy center. And from that center, what happens if you don't become selfish? It's not like you become a narcissist and only think about yourself. That strong self has to, with its connection with Isvara, recognizes its connection with everybody else, and then there is an expansion. So this is okay. Udasina sarvarambha karite. Okay. So that means this the devotee is what? Not dependent. Dependent means your center is becoming weak. Okay? Clean. What does clean mean? The person is clean. What does it mean? That is in Value of Values, Swamiji explains it as
good intentions, pure intentions.
okay. So in he divides it into Bahir Shaucham and Antar Shaucham. Shaucham means cleanliness. External cleanliness means keeping your environment clean. But then there is what we call Anta Shaucham. Inner cleanliness. What is inner cleanliness? Inner cleanliness means you keep your mind relatively clean. So what does it mean? It is not bogged down with resentment, with anger, with fears, with all kinds of opinions, judgments, there are no, that is what we call a clean mind. So there are beautiful prayers. So in Swamiji said, okay, what you can do is here to keep external cleanliness, you can broom, you can do mop. But for inner cleanliness, what will you do? So meditation is a good way because you are actually cleaning from very deep. Right? We saw the orientations, the emotional patterns and everything that you are trying to redo and reorient. But there is one thing which is also pray. Who said pray? Okay, pray. Pray is also beautiful. There are some Vedic prayers. They are actually what? For every day you have to do in order to keep your mind clean. So there is one which is in the morning they do. And what is that? Achyutaya Namaha, Anantaya Namaha, Govindaya Namaha. Every day you do achaman, and you went to the priest and he first made you clean the hand, and then he gave you 3 times, he asked you to do this, and then he again asked you to clean hand. You remember? This is the mantra he was chanting. You remind yourself, I am Achyuta. Achyuta means I am not affected. You are reminding yourself of your nature of Atma. I am unaffected by, I am not touched by anything that is going on at the level of body, mind and senses. Every day you remind yourself of your true nature. Second, Anantaya Namaha. Who am I? I am not this little body, mind, sense complex. I am limitless. But how will I? Right now I am stuck here as this body and mind. How will I know that I am not touched by anything? And how will I know that I am limitless? Govindaya Namaha. What? The one which is to be known through Vedas. So that means you tell that, hey, my life mission is to, through Vedas, I want to recognize myself. Every day when you remind yourself what is your life goal, small things and getting bogged down in small things and small things becoming big, all of this will over a period of time go away. You have to have a mind where big things are seen as big and small things are seen as small. Where everything in its right perspective. Then there is another, in Shiva Manasa Puja, there is yet another beautiful prayer. Every night, Swamiji used to say that we can do it. Kara charana kritam va, kaya jam karma jam va, shravana nayana jam va, manasam va paradam, vihitam va, sarvam etat kshamasva, jai jai karunabde, Shri Mahadeva Shiva. You understand? No? No. Okay. Any action that I have done today, kara, charan, with my hand, with my feet, charana, kara, charana, kritama, kaya, with my body, karma, means any inappropriate action that I have done. Kaya, karma, shravana, if I have heard karma, if I have taken pleasure by hearing something ill of somebody else. Shravana, nayana. If I have seen something, there is some mind which sees only problems. So that sight doesn't mean that only seeing. If I have seen something which is, or I have taken pleasure in seeing somebody else suffering. Kaya jam, karma jam, shravana, nayana jam, manasa. Mentally, if I have thought ill of somebody else. Manasamba, aparadham. Aparadham means all the inappropriate behaviors at all these levels. Vihitamba. Some things I did knowingly, deliberately. Some things I did unknowingly. Vihitam, avihitamba. Sarvam etat kshamasva. May I ask you to please, what? Release me from this. Who am I asking? Jai Jai Karuna Abdi. Abdi means ocean of Karuna, ocean of compassion. Who is ocean of compassion? Mahadeva Shambhu. Who is Lord Shiva. So that means every day you tell yourself that not only the word, you can do things which are inappropriate, knowingly and unknowingly, at so many different places. And every day you say, hey, if I have done, that doesn't mean you get a license to do it next week. Like prayers cannot be used as a license to continue to do. That means it makes you more and more aware. More and more aware that, hey, not only others do what they do, but you also do things which are inappropriate. And you have to have honesty enough. You have to have enough authenticity to say, hey, please, I don't want to repeat it. Because I will create disturbance in the world and I will also create disturbance in myself through karma. So, this is the verse which is what? Cleanliness. Okay? So that is what? Okay. Here who has completed. And this is this sannyasi who has given life. Sannyasi could be somebody who has taken sannyasa or somebody who has devoted one's life to knowledge. The person who has devoted one's life to knowledge and continues to play the role, but those roles become what? Means through which the person grows. That is what we call life of karma yoga. That is also equally beautiful. Lord Krishna says that was about that you can continue to live in this world and make this whole life as an offering to Ishvara for this journey, which is moksha. So this is what he says, that bhakta is beloved to me. Now, the next 4 verses I will do tomorrow. Yes.
Always, often the last few verses are ending with beloved to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So beloved to me means that person is in alignment with Ishvara. Because generally what happens, you are aligned in one way but you are not aligned in the other. So now it's coming to the end of it. So multi-dimensional alignment. And the minute it is multi-dimensional alignment, then you are really flowing with Ishvara. And then as your actions become more refined, your thinking becomes more refined, your whole initiative, attitudes, everything change, then what happens? That the grace flows.
When it says who has completely given up all initiations of actions,
Yeah.
What kind of actions are these?
So this is what I said, this description of sannyasis.
Okay.
But either you can take it literally, that the person has given up everything for my pursuit of self-knowledge, or you can say that even a karma yogi has now decided that the main goal of life is moksha, and life becomes a means through which you gain maturity so that you can get moksha. So even if you are continuing all the activities, the goals are clear, and therefore the whole life becomes dedicated to Ishvara. Pursuit of Ishvara is pursuit of self, because ultimately they are one. It doesn't mean literally that you don't do anything.